Back on this Monday morning edition of Hot Mic on WDAY Extra, streaming on inform.com. Also in KSFL TV for all of our friends in Sioux Falls. Welcome in our first guest of the day. It's our good friend Sam Herder, who joins us each and every Monday at 9:35. Where do we even start, Sam? Well, first of all, I should say happy holidays. How's your break been going, if you even call it a break so far?
Yeah, happy holidays to you as well. Great to be on. And yeah, holidays have been fine. Like we talked about, didn't really feel like Christmas in the Twin Cities
Mm-hmm.
area. It was like, I think it was like close to 40 degrees where I was at. So we actually had a
Oh, really?
bonfire and some drinks out on the driveway on Christmas weekend.
You don't
So
you don't get
I
that every
think
year.
exactly. Yeah. But yeah, things are going good. And a week out from the FCS championship game. Looking forward to it.
Well, we got a lot to get to with you. Let's talk about that FCS National Championship in Frisco, Texas that's coming up. Now that you've had a week to digest after the semifinal games, what are the thoughts going into the championship game between North Dakota State and Montana State?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a great matchup. Should be a close game, which we haven't really had a close national championship game since probably the spring season, because since then it's been pretty decisive results. And so I do think we should have a good game. There's plenty of storylines, whether it's the top two Walter Payton Award finalists going at it a couple of days after the award ceremony. You have the Brent Vegan storyline
Hmm.
as well, playing his alma mater. I mean, there's something about first year NDSU head coaches. Chris Kleiman won a title in his first year. Matt Entz won a title in his first year. We'll see if Tim Palsek can win a national title in his first year. So there's just a lot of different storylines to go around, and that kind of feels, full circle for both teams because Montana State just hasn't been able to get over the NDSU hump. And the
Yep.
last time NDSU won a national title was against Montana State. So it just seems like these two teams were destined to play each other at some point this playoffs.
And another storyline there, the quarterback play is going to be phenomenal. NDSU with Cam Miller, Montana State with Tommy Mellott. And of course, these two teams played in the semifinals last year. Mellott had a phenomenal game. For fans that may not have followed along with what he's done this season, is he playing similar to what he did last year, or would you say even better?
Oh, I think he's much better than what he was last year. More well-rounded. He's throwing the ball a lot more this year and throwing it a lot more accurately. He's kind of really developed as a passer because in 2021, that playoff run when he was inserted as a freshman into the starting lineup, a lot of his throws were just fade routes. He was a running quarterback that threw a lot of fade routes, kind of similar in 2022. Developed more as a passer in 2023, but still was more of a running type quarterback. This year, he still is very, very dangerous with his legs. I mean, he's a powerful runner. He's probably the fastest guy on the field when he does decide to tuck it and run, but he's much more smart. With it, if he has the sideline, he'll run out of bounds. He'll slide before contact. And he does look like a pure passer now. He's not just, kind of throwing simple routes. He's fitting the ball into some really tight windows. He's not necessarily going to go through his progression, seven-step drop, sit in the pocket and stuff like that. He does have the capability to do that, but he doesn't do that all the time. So I think he's much more of a well-rounded quarterback than what he has been, and he's playing the best that he has in his career, and he's had an illustrious career, so that's saying quite a bit.
Yeah, it's going to be a real fun game. It's next Monday, 6 o'clock on ESPN, the FCS championship between North Dakota State and Montana State. All right, let's get to the big news that happened over the weekend. South Dakota State head coach Jamie Rogers electing to take the head coaching job at Washington State. When you saw that go through, what was your initial reaction to that?
It was an interesting couple of days because going, we'll probably never know what the actual order of events was and, the dominoes that all took place. But I would say Thursday and into Friday, even a little bit into Saturday morning, it looked like all eyes were on Brent Vegan and what
Hmm.
he was going to do. And he was definitely in the mix. He was definitely in communication with Washington State. I had heard that Vegan was, very transparent with his Montana State team of what was going on. And, if he were to accept the job, they would be the first ones to know. And so he wasn't, keeping them out of the loop or anything like that. And I think negotiations kind of fell through with Brent Vegan. I don't know specifics, but it would take a very, very very, very nice deal for Brent Vegan to leave Bozeman because he very much likes it there. And I don't think Washington State was able to meet what Brent Vegan was hoping for. And I think we saw that because Jake Dickert was making 2.5 million
Hmm.
a year at Washington State, and I think Jimmy Rogers is set to make 1.5 million a year. And so there are some financial stuff going on at Washington State, and so I don't know if this is the correct order or not, but I think Brent Vegan was the first choice, and they weren't able to meet, some of the stuff that he was asking for, and then so they pivoted. And I think that's when Saturday, all of a sudden, you started to see Jimmy Rogers' name floated out there, and ultimately, that is what Washington State's, decided to do and make their hire. And so, wasn't really expecting that from Jimmy Rogers, but I started to get wind of that a little bit, and I didn't really think he was going to be at South Dakota State for too long.
Hmm.
I know he really, really likes it there. He's a jackrabbit at heart and all that. But I thought within a few years he would most likely take a defensive coordinator position at a Power Four school because he's had those offers before to leave, and I thought at some point he probably would leave. But now this is obviously a head coaching position, and so it's a tough blow, I guess, for South Dakota State. But at the same time, their next hire could be just as good of a head coach as Jimmy Rogers. We'll have to wait and see. But I don't think South Dakota State is in a terrible spot right now. It'll just kind of be an adjustment period for the Jackrabbits.
Do you want to speculate at all what you're thinking? Do you have a name that comes to mind that might be the best fit for SDSU with that role?
Uh,
Or is it
I really
still?
like Dan Jackson.
Yeah.
I do think he's a candidate. I do believe he's interested in the job. I think I talked with Coach Jackson back in like 2019 when he was at South Dakota State. He had a lot of positions at South Dakota State, including recruiting coordinator, and I talked to him about just South Dakota State's change in philosophy and how they recruited. And I think we've seen that recently, just how much depth South Dakota State has. And he's bounced around a little bit. Was at Vanderbilt, spent this last year at Idaho as the defensive coordinator, and the Vandals were really good defensively. He's since taken the defensive coordinator job at New Mexico following Jason Eck, and so it would be a pay cut. I would assume Dan Jackson would take a pay cut if he went from New Mexico, DC to South
Hmm.
Dakota State head coach. But as we know, you can parlay success at South Dakota State into a pretty nice job. Potentially head coach at the FBS level. So
Hmm.
Dan Jackson certainly comes to mind as probably would be my top choice. But there's a lot of good candidates out there as well besides Coach Jackson.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we've seen the dominoes fall a little bit with players going into the transfer portal after even a little bit before this news came out. Griffin Wilde's in the transfer portal, stud wide receiver. Mark Granowski is in the transfer portal as well. Wilde has that do not contact tag. So a lot of us are okay. Washington State's the most likely home for him. Wouldn't you say the same?
I don't think will the entering the transfer portal was necessarily tied to Jimmy
Hmm.
Rogers. That news came out, I believe, the morning of it came. Will that news came out? I actually heard it was going to happen the day before, but I believe it came out Saturday morning, if I remember correctly,
Yep.
that he'd be entering the transfer portal for Wilde. And then, several hours later was when Jimmy Rogers was named the head coach at Washington State. I don't know if those were tied together. I believe Wilde was looking at the ACC as far as transferring to the
Hmm.
ACC, and he had a destination in mind. But since he entered the transfer portal, he's had a lot more offers coming his way, which is kind of funny because he has the do not
Yeah.
contact tag,
Right.
which means he knew where he was going to go. I don't believe that was Washington State. I think he had the ACC in mind,
Mm.
and yet, it's a cutthroat business. And
Yep.
even though do not tag, there's still probably a lot of coaches reaching out to him or his family. And so I think the destination he had in mind might still be in play, but he might be having more offers coming in. Washington State, I'm sure, is on that list, but I don't know if it's at the top of Wildy's list as far as his destination.
Yeah. What do you make of Granowski in the transfer portal? He's the top quarterback prospect available at the moment, but there's teams bigger than Washington State that would likely be on his list, and yet Granowski still has a decision to make if he's going to come back for another year, if he's going to try his hand at the pro level.
Yeah, the first school that comes to mind would be Iowa.
Hmm.
If he was going to go somewhere, possibly a place like Iowa, obviously there would be some comfort level there if he did go to Washington State and followed, probably a lot of the offensive staff at South Dakota State. The move to enter the transfer portal wasn't a huge surprise,
Yeah.
just because it at least allows you to keep your options open if you're Gronowski. I still think his first choice would be to enter the NFL draft, but he'll probably get feedback, from NFL scouts of, where he's at in the draft process. He already has an invite to the East-West Shrine game, which is the same all-star game that Shedeur Sanders is going to be going to, and so there'll be a lot of eyes on Granowski if he does elect to go that route. But I mean, I don't know what rookie contracts are, but in your first, like, he could make more playing at a Power Four school next year than what his rookie contract would be
Definitely.
next year. And so financially, it could make sense. But the flip side of that is if he does go to a Power Four school and he does get beat out, like Reese Poffenbarger, he Albany quarterback, he transfers to the Power Four level, he gets beat out for the starting job, he doesn't play at all. How do you draft a quarterback like Mark Granowski if he goes to a Power Four school and he doesn't even start? So in the long run, it could hurt him if he transfers to the Power Four level. So it's a tough decision for him, but it's a smart decision for him to enter the transfer portal to at least kind of just weigh what options he has out there instead of just being NFL draft all or nothing. At least this way he has some options out there.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And I agree with you that financially it probably makes more sense to go to college compared to what he's going to do in the pros. That's just the way things are right now. Before I let you go, we had some news late last week as well, also revolving around South Dakota football, but the University of South Dakota, Aiden Bauman electing to come back for another season with the Yotes. But Josh Davis, their offensive coordinator, he's going to Fresno State. What do you make about the news out of South Dakota last week?
Yeah, I think it was kind of a bit of a last minute decision for Aiden Bauman. For most of the year, it was expected that this would be his last year for Bauman at USD. The Yotes brought in a transfer quarterback from the FBS level who has since re-entered the transfer portal. He was probably thinking that, he would have a decent chance at the starting job at USD, but now with Bauman, kind of making a last minute decision to return to USD, that made that transfer, decide to go elsewhere. But it's obviously welcome news for the Yotes. Bauman was one of the highest graded quarterbacks in the FCS this last year, and he's an experienced guy. And that's definitely welcome news for USD. Who I know Grace has entered the transfer portal from USD. He's a really good player, but so far I haven't seen any other starters for USD that have entered the portal. So they might have a decent amount coming back. And with what South Dakota State is losing, with what Montana State is losing, NDSU is going to be just fine next year. They'll be a title contender next year, but the Bison lose quite a bit. It's like, I'm not saying USD is going to be the preseason number one team next year, but if some people voted for the Yotes preseason number one, I wouldn't have an issue with that because right now they have a lot of guys coming back, and that's led by Bauman. Anytime you have a starting quarterback coming back, that's going to help you. And you look at all the teams that were in the quarterfinals, I think all of them, their starting quarterbacks are going to be gone, if I'm remembering off the top of my head, except for USD, obviously. So that's great news for the Yotes, and I think they'll be very good next year.
I mean, it's fair to say that Bauman, going into the season, at least next year, top quarterback at the FCS level. There's no doubt about that, right?
Yeah, I would probably say so. It's so hard to know right now who is coming back and who's not, but just based off of the season he's had right now, I would probably say he's probably looked at as the top quarterback in the FCS next year. I would have to look at it a little bit more. Giovanni McCoy might be coming back to the FCS. We'll see where he's at, potentially going to UIW, except it's kind of gone silent there. But yeah, I think Bauman will certainly have preseason recognition heading into next year.
All right, Sam. Hey, I appreciate you for joining us here on this Monday morning. You got a busy week ahead of you. I'm sure a lot more news is going to come your way throughout the week, and look forward to seeing you in Texas.
All right, sounds good. We'll see you there.
All right, Sam Herder from Hero Sports joining us on this Monday morning edition of Hot Mic on WDAY Extra, Inform.com, and KSFL TV in Sioux Falls. We'll step aside. When we come back, we will wrap up hour number one, get you ready for hour two on this Overreaction Monday.